There we go.
Oh, you can see me now?
I can see you now.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So good to see your face, to
Well,
meet
good to see
you.
your face. I want to hear about you first. I know
Me?
you're interviewing me, but I want to hear about you. Who is this woman that I speak it to?
I know. We haven't had a chance to meet, but I'm Naija, and I started with Live Nation Urban back in March as the marketing and creative services manager. So yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you
So
so
what does
much.
that mean? What do you do?
So essentially, well, with COVID happening, basically my job has been all digital. So I've been handling everything that you all see on socials, creating all of the social initiatives that we're doing in partnerships with artists. This series, curating this series, our Meet the Execs and Meet the Founders series. So just delivering the Live Nation Urban brand on a digital platform versus our in real life experiences that everyone is used to seeing. So yeah,
Yeah. So you had to totally pivot. Well, it's
yeah,
nice to meet
exactly.
you and
It's
great
nice to
job.
meet you too. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to speak with you. I know that your experience is so vast, so I really wanted to just dive into it because you really had an inspiring story. I've done my research,
Oh, thanks.
and you've had such an explorative type of story to get you to where you are. So I kind of wanted to start at the beginning. I know you went to Temple University.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see if you could let us know what your life was like in college, what you studied, and how you really got going.
Yeah. Oh, I love that question because we take it all the way back. So I
Yeah.
went to Temple University for international business and marketing. And when I was
hmm
there, I studied psychology. I was an RA. I was the president of the Community Service Association. I was like runner up for homecoming queen one year. I was trying
So
to do
involved.
all like just again like super student, all like
Yeah.
involved doing the absolute most in all of the things. And then I graduated from Temple, actually took a job with Temple in higher education right after because I wanted to pursue my master's degree, and Temple offered me a full-time position to work in university housing and residential life. So I was working with students and I was working in higher education at that point,
hmm
planning, doing a lot of conflict resolution, which I'll talk about how it like helped me from a media landscape, but
Right.
conflict resolution, planning programs for, students, and then just working on, and then I was also teaching at Temple. So I was an
hmm
adjunct for, I think it was maybe 4 years when I was there. I stayed at Temple in higher education for 5 years. And I was an adjunct teaching a film class because I loved film and I loved
hmm
storytelling and how do you take this and turn this into a viable story. So taught and then worked in higher education and then left to go to get a job as a producer at MTV and MTV production. So MTV Networks. And I was producing a scripted drama series for MTV. So this was back when My So-Called Life and Degrassi High. So y'all know
Yeah.
Degrassi High
Yeah.
experience. So, but working with those writers on teen scripted drama series. So it was fun. And then I started working for, I was working in television and production. And then I went into magazines and I was
Right.
working for TLC, Discovery Health, and
Right.
producing fashion editorials for Lucky Magazine.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to get into next. How did you pivot into, because that I actually come from an editorial world too. That's where I started, on blogs more so. But how did you kind of pivot from what you were doing at Temple into this world of editorial?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I'm the type of person I like to explore things and I'm like, what am I good at? And in order to find out what you're good at, you actually have to do those things.
Yep.
And so when I left, I was, teaching film, making short film and all of those things, and then went into production. But when I went into production, it was working on scripted series. I wanted to work in reality television, so I started working in reality television. I also liked magazines and producing. It was still producing. Like, hey,
Yeah.
a photo spread. We're doing this thing with Mark. I remember a big shoot I had to do. We had to cover like Marc Jacobs, but they wanted an artist. So I just started calling people saying, I want to do more with magazines. Whenever I had a break from TV, I would produce fashion editorials. And then I started writing. I was like, I did like guest editing for Mary Claire once or twice, or I don't know how many times, but I just started experimenting. And I think the pivot was, I was doing a little bit of it when I graduated from college, and then I started to gradually jump into it. And then that just resulted in me, you know, working in TV, working in magazine, and then starting my agency from that, because I was able to get so much experience in broadcast and then in the world of journalism, you know, working in magazines. So taking all of that and putting it together, and I formed my multimedia agency after doing all of that work.
Right. And I'm going to jump into your agency, but just taking a step back too, I wanted to ask, what were some, I guess, as a Black woman in media during those times and crossing over into so many different sectors of media and entertainment, were there any, I guess, hardships that you landed on? And I guess, how did you learn from them? I'm sure there are things that you learned and you still apply to your work today of what you learned. So what were some hardships that you kind of faced back then?
You know, and I think it's the hardships that I was facing back then, I think some folks are still facing them now. I remember working on a major production, and as a young Black woman, you know, not being able to see myself or get any advice from anyone that looked like me. It was myself and another person, and the other person was like a production assistant. And so I was more, so in production, they say like above the line and below the line. Above the line are like the executives and the executive producer. I was above the line, and I was young. I was only, I don't know, like 20 something, early 20s. And so, you know, being an executive above the line, so to speak, was tough when I didn't have anyone to sort of like, you know, eat lunch with and be like, girl, did you see what happened there? Or like, I can't believe they're making us stay to do this shot. So I felt really isolated and alone because I couldn't really relate to anyone. And there was no solve there. It was just like, you kind of have to do it and just get through it. And what I found out, so this was years ago, that young production assistant who was the other Black person there, he reached out to me, and now he works for BET, NBC. He's a big filmmaker. He reached out to me. He said, I remember when I was a production assistant and there was only one other person that looked like me. And he was like, thank you for inspiring me, because I went on to do all of the things that you told me that we could do. So I didn't know at the time that I was like, we're going to make this, we're going to do this, we're going to get out of this, we're going to be big. And he actually went on to be a big producer. I'm not going to name him because he might not want the shout out, but like he sent me a DM a few weeks ago, and I felt like really proud of that. Like that's what we need to do. We need to inspire people without sometimes knowing we're inspiring people. But I'm still learning all the lessons. I mean, I learned how to deal with people. The entertainment industry, as you know, Naija, it's a tough industry. You're working with all kinds of personalities. I did a lot of crying in those early days because I was like, well, what did I do? Like, why me? Like, I took everything personally. And so I think what it taught me was to have like a sleeve of Teflon. And it was preparing me to work with all kinds of personalities, you know, a decade later. So, you know, 10 years ago, or, you know, when I was in my early television days and production days, it was just tough. Because I took it personally. I was young. I was like, oh my gosh, it's my fault. They didn't like the script because I said something. And now it's just like all of those things that I learned, you know, dealing with people, negotiations, how to work on contracts, how to work with people who are in unions, and how to work with people who aren't in unions, how to be creative, how to create tension, how to perfect the art of storytelling. I mean, I learned so many life lessons along the way that really helped me to form my agency and to help me now just work with different kinds of personalities and people.
Yep, exactly. And I think you've obviously done a phenomenal job in taking those lessons and forming them into what we see today, which is Skai Blue. So are you able to, for those who don't know, let people know what Skai Blue is and how did it come to fruition and what your mission is for your agency?
Yeah, I love that. So Sky Blue Media, we're a multimedia communications agency, and we sort of have this swim lane, or we had the swim lane of being in non-traditional communications, but with the evolution of how people are consuming and communicating, in the earlier days when I started it. So my agency is 10 years. We're in our celebratory 10th year. And when I started it 10 years ago, I said, I want to disrupt public relations and I want to disrupt the model. I worked for a few PR agencies and I was like, I don't like how they do things. They're just sending
Yeah.
out press releases. I want to produce a sizzle reel and I want to produce
Yes.
a video and I want to pitch people that way. I don't want to send anyone a press release. I don't want to have to call them. I don't want to have to do that. I want to create for people and then tell them the story that way. So I
Yep.
created this agency based off of the work that I did at MTV, the work and the script supervising that I did at TLC, the fashion editorials that I was producing for Lucky Magazine. So I took all of those things and turned it into this multimedia agency. And so we separate our work into people, products, and places. On the people side, we represent some phenomenal activists. We represent the co-creator of the Black Lives Matter movement, Alicia Garza. We represent Jill Scott. So, we work
Yeah.
within the Live Nation family. We represent M. Night Shyamalan. We're working on his marketing and online reputation management. So with the people space, we work with some prominent celebrities. We work with Serena Williams. We work with her social media and content. And then on the product space, we have clients like Airbnb, Morgan Stanley, Dell. So a lot of tech companies we work with. And then in the place space, we've worked with cities such as Memphis and Philadelphia, which is how I know a lot of folks, Philadelphia, on what their global identity is. So what is your positioning as a city, as a region? What is the story that you're telling to people to attract businesses and to get people to not only move there, but to make a life and a live work space, live work and play space in some of the cities that we've worked with?
Yeah. I love that because it's like you're not just like you said, you're not just a publicist. You're part of the entire scope of the business. And that's really important to put a face to a brand or a person or a creative. So touching on what you were just mentioning, the type of clients that you have is such a diverse list of clientele. Why was it so important when you were creating Sky Blue that your roster of people that you represent, why was it so important that it be so diverse?
Yeah, I think there's so much complexity of thought in storytelling, and I never wanted to just tell one story, right? Like
Hmm.
in working in product, when I first started, I was working for a business improvement district, and it was just telling the stories of the business owners, and I loved that. And I was like, okay, and then what? And
Hmm.
being able to help people perfect their stories or to find the language around their stories to me is my passion. I mean, I do it at home
Yeah.
as well. My daughter just said, hey, mom, after work, can you help me with some languaging around describing what my school activities are? And I'm like, you know what your school activities are. And she was like, no, but I just need some colorful language to
Love that.
explain the school activities. So for me, it's always been since I was a kid, and we talked about college, but I can remember as far back as fourth grade, always wanting to be a storyteller and
Yep.
being able to amplify the stories of others. So whether it's a tech product that's, the Dell, they're rolling out their XPS. How do we tell that story? For some of our clients, they're releasing a new song, or they have a new project, or they have a new film coming out in 2021. What is that story that we're telling? And for the cities, like I talked about before, from an identity standpoint, our favorite thing is to draw up what the language is, what the story is, and then what mediums in which we're telling those stories.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of brings me to a point. I actually wrote it down. So on our Meet the Exec series last week, we actually spoke with Cortez Bryant, who is another friend of the brand. And he made a phenomenal point that I actually wrote down so that I can remember. But he mentioned that in relation to branding, it's important to tap into what comes natural to the artist or to the brand and to develop themes and stories around those things to build campaigns, collaborations, partnerships, things that are already existing within the person that you're working with. Is that something that you practice at Sky Blue as well?
Absolutely. I mean, first, I love that because it shows that when you're working, I always say, like, there's like me search and there's research. Me search is like what I like, what I saw, And the research is like having all of the data and the statistics that help you to inform your decisions. And I think because we live in this age of disinformation and people approach so much of news or stories or things that they're seeing online with skepticism, you have to be able to have, you know, an informed approach to the work that you're doing. Secondly, from a storytelling standpoint, our brains work best when we're told a story.
Yes.
So the narratives, if you think back to things that you remembered in school, if you think back to when someone asks you to do something, you remember the story that they told you. You remember the beginning, the middle, and the end. And that's because programmatically, that's how our brains are wired. Our brains are wired to consume stories, to process stories, and to react to stories. So the stories are the ones, you know, when you're building out a campaign or you have a launch or you have a message that you have to convey or something that you're putting out, it has to be story first.
Got it. Um, and then I guess that kind of leads me into wondering your day to day. How are you creating these stories? How are you and your team developing these themes around, you know, how you're delivering your client, and amplifying your client? So what does your day to day generally look like, especially now during COVID when we're in quarantine? What does your day to day look like?
I mean, no day is the same, to be quite honest. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I try to have a schedule where it's like I get up and I read my emails, but I would say the high level things are the stories that I'm reading. I come from a space of I need to be inspired, and in order for me to be inspired, I need the space to be reflective in order to think. I find out like I'm most creative when I'm able to take a beat and I'm able to read and I'm able to like process what's going on in the world. And, you know, I know my own decisions and I know what's happening. So one is being able to have that time to think and be creative and have that scheduled time to be creative. And then when, you know, I'm given that time to do that, I'm able to work with my team. I mean, you know, we have a team, so it's not just me.
Yeah.
You know, I always want to give snaps and claps and a shout out to the other folks that work at Sky Blue Media, and they're 25 folks. So it's a pretty big team to be, well, big in a sense of, you know, I started it by myself and
Mm-hmm.
now we have 26 people if you include like some of the additional consultants that we have. But you know, those folks are reading and consuming information and scouring, you know, what's happening and what the trends are and what the language is that's out there. And then we're able to support our clients in a way that goes beyond just a press release or just goes beyond, hey, we've got to hit this mark or we've got to
Mm-hmm.
talk about this public, we've got to talk to this publication. It comes from a space of what are the stories that you want to tell and who do you want to tell those stories to? I mean, a lot of it, you know, when our clients say, hey, you know, I want to tell this story, you know, and I want to say it on CNN. I mean, you know, there's relationships that come into
Mm-hmm.
play. So we have folks on our team who are in the lanes of, you know, managing relationships and relationship management. So if our clients say, I have a really great story to tell and I want to tell it here, or, you know, there's something that I've been meaning to talk about, this project that I've kept secret for a year, we will devise the plan to say, here's how it should translate from a social media standpoint. Here's how it should translate from a digital rollout standpoint. And here's how it should roll out from a traditional public relations standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And then are there, I guess for right now, again, being in COVID, any exciting, I guess, projects that your team is currently working on now that you're able to speak on, that you're really excited about and looking forward to?
Oh, wow. I mean, we're working on the thing is we're working on so much. I'd say at the outset of COVID, we began working a lot behind the scenes with our clients on like the nuanced conversations that were happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how are they showing up and what's the specific language they were using and things. So we were doing a lot of that and we still do a lot of that. I mean, a lot of our work is in the space of equity and communications and making sure that underrepresented voices are seen. There are a lot of projects. I think the ones I can talk about, I'm looking like at our client board. One of our clients just launched her book, The Purpose of Power, Alicia Garza. So that just happened. Our another client, M. Night Shyamalan, just announced that the second season of Serve It, which is happening on Apple, will be
Yep.
coming out. So follow M. Night Shyamalan for those specifics and his new movie. So these are all of the awesome things. We have like things coming up, you know, obviously we're getting ready for the election. So a lot of our clients are
Yeah.
just doing all of those messages and using the power of their influence and the power of their voice to get people to vote and to get people to show up. So there are a lot of projects around that. We actually just worked on the entire marketing strategy for a new show that was picked up by Netflix, that is the brainchild of Ludacris and his daughter, Karma. So that was announced. So I'm able to say
Love
that. So
that.
it's exciting because you get to see this little girl, and we got to work on some of the creative, this little girl with this cute fro and all of the things that she's going to bring to the world. So that was just announced. And we've been working on this for over a year.
Hmm.
And still through COVID. And that was just announced that Netflix is going to be partnering with us on that series. So I would say
Amazing.
so I'm like, I can't even remember.
Yes.
There's just so many exciting things that we're working on. And I'm launching a tech platform in 2021 that I can't talk about, but
Hmm.
that's going to be major. And I also have another company called Everyday Jane. It's a
Yes.
clothing line, and I've partnered with HSN on that. And we have another capsule collection coming out in the spring. So lots of projects, like
Yeah.
lots of things,
A
all the
lot
things,
going on, all
Aisha.
good things.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, I do want to ask if, you know, like I said, you have such a multifaceted career and you've gotten to where you are by being so multifaceted. What advice could you give to any young entrepreneur that's looking to carve out a career path similar to yours to be in the world of PR and communications?
Gosh, there's so much. I would say, and tell me if I'm going to go on a rant, but like, I would say you have to be really tenacious in this field. Don't take anything personal. It's never about you. A lot of folks will, and especially if you're good at what you do, you tend to be a mirror for other people. And folks that serve in the position of being able to be a mirror for other people and telling them the truth and telling them or holding folks accountable tend to have the tougher road. And I would say
Yep.
if you're someone that understand your values. And I would say it is very important when you start out in any career, whether it's this one or you go on a different path, make sure you articulate and repeat to yourself every day what your values are.
Yep.
Because if you don't stand for something, you know, the quote, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Yep.
I typically have to remind myself, like if something is like irking me or bothering me, I'm like, why is it bothering me? I get back to what my values are. Oh, Rakia, remember, your values are authenticity. Your values are freedom of thought. Your and artistic expression. Your values are integrity. So I really, really know what my values are. So I know like what things I should be getting into and the things that I should stay away from, because you don't ever want to wear yourself too thin. And so if you know who you are, what you stand for, what your gift is in the world, and what you should be doing, then you stay a little more committed. I think some of us will want to do all the things. It's like, oh, that sounds exciting. But if you don't hearken those things back to what your core values are or what your mission is, like a lot of folks will talk about, like in business, what is your mission? What is your vision? What is your brand manifesto? But some of us don't do it for ourselves personally. We are, oh, my company's mission is this, and but what are your personal values? What's your personal mission? What's your personal vision? Where do you want to go? What's your brand manifesto? What are the two sentences that you say to yourself, you know, every single day to say, hey, I am this, I want to do this, and this is my path. So I
Yep.
would say my best piece of advice is really understanding your values and understanding, and somebody says support system. Yes, the people
Yes.
around you. My former chief of staff used to and her name's Almaz, I can call her out. She would always say, you know, make sure that you have friend tours around you. So like your friend tours, and they may not be mentors, but they're like a friend slash mentor that gives you the advice that you need, not the advice that you want to hear. And I think
Mm,
sometimes we need those folks to say, not, everybody will say, you're amazing, you're a star. But it's like, no, you know what?
yeah.
I really don't like how you showed up with this. Or I don't think you were a good leader. Or, and say it in a way that obviously won't like hurt your feelings or whatever.
Right.
But understanding who you are, what you do, and what your commitment to the world is will really help you along the way.
Thank you so much. You are incredible, and it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. And thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of the press release.
Thank you, Naisha. This
Thank
was
you,
great.
Rakia.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.